So the work that Tyler is presenting is called, I have my notes here on the side, it's called valIDity. And we're gonna be seeing the 11-minute piece in just a little bit. Before we do, I wanted to read just a quick little like 1-sentence bio of each of his performers so you all know a little bit beforehand. And then give you some tips for viewing this work because it's Zoom and things are weird. So to start off, we have Tyler Rivera. Tyler is a New Jersey-born, Philadelphia-based performer, choreographer, and maker. And they are thrilled to be able to present this work for all of you, all the while completing their last year at Georgian Court University. We also have Alonzo Magsino, who's a New Jersey-based performer and is currently a senior dance major at Georgian Court University. And last but not least, we have Quincy Southerland, a New Jersey-based performer who is currently a senior dance major at Georgian Court University. We have Georgian Court University in the house tonight. So super, super excited that you're all here. And so we're gonna be presenting now the piece, and I have some tips for this viewing experience to make it as seamless as possible. First order, if you wanna turn up your device's brightness, and your sound all the way up. If you have any headphones lying around, I recommend plugging them in, or little like earpods or whatever. If you've got them, plug them in now. Once we go into presentation mode, our little faces in the little panel, you can minimize that screen so you're actually able to see the full presentation mode without like a little panel of our faces. So you can minimize that screen so you get the full viewing experience. And last, if there's, for any reason, you're experiencing any sort of like technical glitch or it's not quite working out for you, I think Tyler or someone on our team, oh, it's already in there, is gonna put a YouTube link to the work that you can watch in your own time if for some reason it's glitchy during this presentation. So those are all my notes beforehand. I wanna quickly pass it over to Tyler to introduce the piece and then we'll go right in. Tyler, hi.
Hey, thanks, Eric. That was awesome. Okay, so a little bit about the piece. It's called valIDity. It is a multidisciplinary dance theater piece that explores and challenges the queer experience. The choreography dives into alternative methods of understanding self and sexuality and questions Western sociocultural ideologies. Through movement, voice, and performance, the work dissects the heavy stigma and perspectives on gayness as a fixed identity. So without further ado, let's make sure we're all muted and videos off, and Arturo, I believe, will start the screen share.
really, really amazing. All right, let's get Quincy, Tyler, and Alonzo off of mute so we can have a little chat. And I'm going to offer everyone 3 things to think about, just a brief moment before we pick the dancers' brains. So just take a second. You can close your eyes if you want, if that feels good, or you can keep them open. So the first thing I want you to think about with the work is something you saw physically. What did you see with your eyes? It could be a word, a brief sentence, but just reflect on one thing that you saw happen on stage through your Zoom screen. And get specific with it. The next thing I want you to think about is something you felt, heart space. Is there a particular emotion that came up for you, a feeling, as you watched the work? Any particular feeling, there's no judgment to it, just it is what it is. I'm seeing people sharing in the comments, which is great. You can keep it to yourself, you can share in the comments, anything is welcome. And the last thing I want you to think about is one thing the piece made you think of. So going into your headspace, was there anything that you associated for yourself, or that your mind sort of like wandered off based off of what you saw? So thinking in cerebral, where did your mind take you? Did you create a story? Did you have your own personal experience reflected? Were you confused? Were you, yeah, just a particular thought that came through your mind? Cool. Thanks, everyone. So let's get the dancer friends unmuted so we can have a quick little chat. So for everyone, just to cue you in on what's going on, we're going to have about a 20-ish, 25-minute conversation. And then we'll take a brief break so people can stretch, use the bathroom, do whatever they have to do, a quick little break, and then we'll come back and have time for an audience Q&A. And then we'll wrap it up just so folks are aware of what's going on. So Tyler, hi, how you doing today?
Hey.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, you know.
Yeah?
How are you?
Doing well. Quincy, how are you
Thanks.
doing?
I'm doing all right as well. Very good.
Yeah, you doing all right? How about you, Alonzo?
I'm just really excited. I've never done anything like this before. So used to stage, now we're virtual.
Same. Well, I'm glad this is your first. I'm glad I'm your first. We're going to keep it queer today, people. We're keeping it queer. So I felt like it was important, given the context of this panel, we're looking at queerness, Latinidad. And so there's a lot packed into that intersection. And there's so many different nuances, and there's like a beautiful complexity to what that experience can be for people. And so in honor of that, and it feels like this work is so identity driven, I thought it would be interesting to hear each of you share how you came to this work, what parts of your identity you came forward, or what parts of your identity you brought forward in the creation of this work. And so to set an example, as a viewer, as somebody who witnessed the work, I brought forward my queerness. I brought forward I'm first generation Cuban American. I have light skin. I was viewing it through that lens, cisgender male, viewing it through able-bodied dance. So these are all the things that I was coming at as a viewer, as a witness to the work. And I'm curious if each of you can just kind of do a quick shout out of how you approached this work and what you brought forward.
I was unsure if you wanted to do a specific order.
No. Everyone unmute yourselves. Let's not be like collegiate about it. Let's just, this is a conversation. Yeah, perfect, great.
Cool. Hey. So I'm Tyler. I use he and they pronouns both. And in this work and in the process, I brought my queerness. I brought my privilege as a white passing person, my existence as Latinx Puerto Riqueño, and philosophical inquiry towards queer engagement.
I guess I'm gonna go next.
Yeah, chime in.
My name is Quincy. I go by he, him, his, and I brought my my queer experience, I guess, like you said, able-bodied experience. I mean, dancer. I guess I brought my ethnicity and my sexuality and all those things to the piece.
Thank you. How about you, Alonzo?
I'm Alonzo. I brought my queer experience. I brought my sexuality definitely is into it, but also like my experience with the politics of movement and how movement is tied to your identity. Is it or is it not? So that's the main things that were in there.
Wonderful. So for you, Tyler, I'm curious if we're I'm hearing a bit of an echo. Is that just me? Am I crazy?
Yeah, that happens when like multiple people are unmuted at one time and someone's talking.
So there's logic to this. Okay, so maybe if okay, so if you maybe have to mute yourself, sorry, and then we can avoid any of that. So for Tyler specifically, you mentioned you brought forward your queerness or Latinidad, and I'm wondering if we just like dive right into that intersection and that like really, it's such a loaded thing, and to even begin like dissecting it seems like such a daunting task. So let's just keep it about the work and look at that intersection through the lens of the work that you created. And so I'm wondering if you're able to speak to your experience as both queer and Latinx. Are there ways that those identities parallel each other? Do you feel like they have sort of like similar like lived experiences, or are there ways that you feel like your queerness and your Latinidad manifest differently in your day-to-day life? How do you reconcile that?
Yeah, it is kind of a loaded and difficult question. I think yeah, my queerness and my Latinidad do manifest differently as like my upbringing and my white passing body kind of removed me from the opportunity or possibility to experience direct oppression in that way that like directly relates to my Latinx identity. So I'm still finding it like interesting or difficult to kind of talk about or unpack. But my experiences as a queer person usually are all the same, revolving around like generalizations being made towards queer folk upon revealing one's queerness. Like as soon as you're found out or you're sharing your queerness, it's like all of a sudden you're in a box now, and you have to not have to, but you're expected to conform to certain characteristics, like stereotypically feminine traits, and it's like it's kind of like what about me, like the personal, my inner voice is included in these expectations, and oftentimes I find that it's really not. It's just a picture in someone's mind. So that's I don't know if that answers that.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like what I'm hearing, as far like just to reflect back to what I'm hearing, you're talking specifically about a coming out with queerness and how that then impacts people's perception of you, whether that's your imagined perception or if someone's sort of like inflicting that on you or is expecting that of you in whatever way. And I feel like when you were talking about, both of us have a shared experience of being light-skinned or white passing Latinx, and I feel like that's its own, there's a paralleled experience with like a coming out there of like the assumption is that we're not Latinx, and then we share that with people, and that has its own set of like, oh, I'm not this enough, or I'm imposter syndrome, or there's a specific way that people expect, you know, it's not, what I've come to learn is that it's more internal, like all of the things that we're sort of like negotiating and reconciling are definitely put on by ourselves. But yeah, this idea of like coming out and how we are perceived versus like what's actually underneath. And to what you were just speaking about with your inner voice, I feel like to bring it back to the work, I feel like voice and being heard / being silenced, perhaps that could be strong, but felt like it was part of the work. I wonder if that was something that you were considering.
100% is. I figured we would touch on that later.
Cool.
Yeah.
We'll get there, folks. Patient.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So speaking of the work, I was curious if you could dig deep into the creative process, and if you're thinking about how you made this work, if you wanted to share any of the key ingredients that you considered, whether that be any sort of personal anecdote, a specific experience you had, if there were props or costumes or specific choreographic structures or research, journaling, anything that felt like it was a key component in this work that you felt like the work had to revolve around these key things as far as like a recipe. And the same thing can go for your dancers as well, if they want to chime in too with your experiences as being performers in the work.
Sure. Here it is, the microphone, the voice.
It's what we've all been waiting for, everyone, the microphone.
Yeah. From the beginning of the process in brainstorming ideas for the work, I knew that I wanted to have this microphone, specifically because conversations around queer identity, I feel, are really focused around one specific kind of person or archetype. And so I really wanted to experiment and explore the different kinds of ways that we can allow our personal experiences to shine through. And the metaphor of just like your voice being heard just became literal in this way. And I'm sure Alonzo and Quincy can speak on this more, but our personal experiences started out as journaled texts that we were experimenting with. So everything that you heard and saw is from the heart. Yeah, so I wanted everyone to see that everyone has their own experience and they're valid in their own ways. And similarly, all of the movement was generated, or most of the movement, especially in the different solos, were generated in collaboration with the performers and were prompted off of experiential ideas. And the costuming, I just wanted some fierce queer variety.
Yeah, I feel that. I'm all about queer variety.
Yeah.
Something you said earlier, as far, like, I feel like you keep bringing back this idea of like these expectations or these sort of like stereotypical ways of existing as queer people and or Latinx. I feel like what it's making me think of is what I was saying at the very beginning of this, is like there's a beautiful complexity to being queer, and there, you know, it's just so, it's undeniably prismatic. There's so many different ways of being queer. There's so many different ways of being Latinx. And I think you know, you're offering one slice of that pie. And I feel like culturally there's sort of like a consciousness around that intersectionality. I think there's a way in which people are recognizing that binaries are just not working anymore. They haven't been working, they're not going to work ever. And so when thinking about people's identities, it's just, it doesn't do anyone a favor or service to just sort of pigeonhole them. And I think that's the beauty of queerness and the beauty of being Latinx. And I feel like it's to be really like on the nose with it, Latinx in and of itself, we're queering the language. Like that in and of itself, we're removing gender, we're fucking with how people are interacting with the language. And so by plopping a big X on the Latinx, it's like, hello, like like we're doing that so forward, and it feels, yeah, the time has come. And just hearing what you're saying about being sort of voiceless, and I feel like there's a proactivity around like changing that. There's still a long way to go, obviously, but I feel like that made me think of like, I'm like, oh yeah, we're staring at this Latinx all the time. It's like so queer. It's a queering of the language, which feels like really relevant to what you're presenting today.
Yeah,
Alonzo,
and also,
sorry, good.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Right off the bat, the first usage of the microphone is it being pulled away. It's like, I'm saying I, and then I don't get to finish. So it's like I'm wanting to dive into the personal and the experience. I mean, the opportunity is taken away, and so that, like, I think sets the tone for that idea.
Yeah. Alonzo and Quincy, I'm curious if in your experience in creating the work, I don't know what the dynamic was as far as the creation of the work, if you were helping choreograph or sounds like you all were pretty involved in generating material. So I'm curious if you guys can speak to any of what you felt like you wanted to bring into the work, or any of the like key ingredients that you felt needed to be put in there.
Do you want to go first or should I?
Quincy, take it away. You got this.
Quincy, go, go, go.
Quincy, you got this.
So like Tyler said, this was a super collaborative experience, and like it started off as like a senior piece for him, but like we all like started putting in like our personal experiences and things like that. For my specific section, I dealt with like I guess like stereotyping, like how Black boys are perceived and like the things that they go through almost, and how they're almost like sexualized or seen as like exotic or something like that, which is yes, that was the experience that I was going for. And
how about you, Alonzo? Oh, Quincy, you're back. You're back. You want to take a breather? Cool. Alonzo, I'm curious what your experience was with creating the work.
Well, of course, it was very collaborative. I mean, of course, we did the journaling, we did a lot of writing in the beginning. Specifically, Tyler, he guided us through just so that we can have some sort of cohesiveness, even though we are putting our personal experiences and that they might be different. There was a way that he tied them all together. Tyler tying them all together. Okay. But getting to the meat of it, the stuff that I put in for me was my queer experience from when I was in high school, specifically about what it means to be a closeted teenager. What does it mean to be actually a closeted person and not express who you are, to hold back all of your expressions? And in my case, I'm fine now, but it came from a very dark time in my life. So I ended up even now I kind of stutter with it, but I think there's enough to say that I literally stutter in the piece, you know, in the writing. I'm gonna come back and you'll see how this ties in. I ended up making a poem about my closeted experience and how the longer I was closeted, the longer I tried to become somebody I was not. And I wanted to become, some of the words are gonna sound familiar if you heard them. I wanted to become like somebody I wasn't, but I also wanted to be myself. I didn't know what I wanted. some might argue that with a different context. So it just became, I want, and you don't know what it is. And that's the biggest thing. You don't know what anybody's experiencing just because they don't express it. And for me, I was holding back a lot of myself in high school. Specifically as a dancer and as an actor performer, I went extreme with my movement practices. How does, I know I mentioned earlier, the politics of movement, the stereotypes of how is a man supposed to move? How is a man supposed to hold themselves and conduct themselves in a space, you know? I didn't mention this before you asked what else I put in. I was also training at the time as a competitive ballroom dancer where I did some Latin dancing. So you definitely saw some cha-cha action in there. Wasn't the cleanest, but there you go. But I thought of a great juxtaposition where you have fluid, stylized movement of a man's body together with a stuttering, robotic text representing my becoming of something that's no longer human, you know, and it's very tiring, you know, how you dress, how you move, which way you look, how your hips move, your shoulders, your swagger. It's a lot. And to do that for 4 years of your life it's very tiring. I know that's really heavy stuff. I know it is. But when I heard about Tyler's piece, when he invited me to do this piece, and he started working with a microphone, I could start seeing how things were tying together. And it, in a beautiful way, like you say earlier, like queerness can be a beautifully complex thing, you know. My closeted experience was very complex and not everybody understands it, where you have a million things you want to say, but the only thing that comes out is the most important words, and then you stutter and no one understands. But on a lighter note, I feel like I can express that now, because sometimes I felt like I was alone, but in fact, you're not alone. You know, there's other people out there, and maybe, I don't know, maybe that's why I'm in this piece. I don't want to sound conceited or anything, but like, sometimes I think about it, you know? So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy that Tyler brought me into this piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there's a way, I mean, as we know, there's a way that moving, quite literally moving through your sort of like inner dialogue and sort of like your traumas, perhaps, that might be too strong, but if there's a way that you can sort of like physicalize your lived experience, there's so much power in that. There's so much, you know, we're getting caught up with words and like having to articulate ourselves, but there's a way that the somatic language can do so much emotionally and for other people. This is making me think of, I had this experience with my family, actually it was at FLACC, like 2015 or 2016, where I had each of my family members choreograph or short solo on me. And it was like so incredibly awkward to be in a room with my dad, who is just like this burly man, you know, like machismo to the, you know, love. I mean, if you're watching, hi dad, sorry, but you know, like he's like a total, you know, stereotypical Latino, you know, immigrated to this country, like, you know, all that stuff. And I had, you know, hey dad, I want you to choreograph a contemporary dance solo on me. And he's just like, and so he like showed up to the rehearsal in like a suit and tie, and like, you know, I was just like, get comfy, get cozy. And like the first hour we were just sort of like sitting in chairs, you know, looking at each other, and it was really hard to connect because it's all these walls we build up because of our identities of like, this is really intimate and really vulnerable. And then, you know, I eventually was like, let's keep it simple. Think about like one specific memory in your past, one of your favorite memories you have of me, and like move it in your legs, for example. Like just use your legs only. And he like went on his tippy toes and he just started like bawling and crying. He was just like unlocked this whole thing. So the point of that story is just like the power of like what moving through your stuff the power of that, quite literally moving your body as far as like your engagement with this work and inviting others to view it, feels like that's the power that dance has when talking about these like really layered and really nuanced experiences. So thanks for opening up about that.
I think that's one of the big takeaways I got from Tyler's piece, or our piece, is that just like making valid like our feelings and our identities and all these things that we go through, which is like such a relief, honestly, I feel. There was in the beginning of the choreographic process or whatever, we were wearing originally dresses, like we each had a different colored dress and we were wearing those. And eventually the costumes, they changed and they like fit our identities more specifically. Like more recently, I've become like really obsessed with crop tops.
Yeah, you have.
And the best thing ever. And Tyler, when he was getting the costumes, he kept that in mind and he got me a crop top, like a black one that like fit very well. It was best thing ever.
Yes.
So yeah, that's what I have to say about the piece. Just really.
I feel that. I mean, it's in the name. It's in the name, like validity, and there's a way, like the power of that. And I, you know, like if everyone wants to breathe into like expansive, love-filled, nurturing, nourishing, like imagining a world that like we come as we are fully, and like the beauty of that. So just like breathing into that expansiveness and like hope that can bring. I want to reflect that back to you, Quincy. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you all, and thank the dancers for joining us and having a conversation. So thank you. Mwah.